Bob's loving me right now. You're this. You're the cup. With God, all things are possible. So what impossible thing did you do last year? If we are not doing the impossible, we're embarrassing God. In 2 Corinthians, I've made a mess. I always make a mess. Doesn't matter. In 2 Corinthians 2:15, it says that we're called to God to be the fragrance of Christ. When you walk through the lobby of this hotel, did people stop and stare at you and go, that has got to be a Christian? Did they smell that aspect of you? Now, there's many aspects to the fragrance of Christ. We could talk about the compassion fragrance of Christ, his service part, but we could also talk about the result part. I believe that if we're not doing the impossible, we're embarrassing God.
The year was 1995. Brian Klemmer was developing a tape series featuring superachievers who were impacting our generation. He wanted to include Bob in this elite series. Finding out that Bob was doing a seminar in Monterey, California, he made arrangements to drive down from his home located above San Francisco and do a live interview. During their time together, Bob discussed his Hawaii conference, which was being held at the Kauai Marriott Hotel. While Brian was driving back home, he called and registered as an attendee. When Bob discovered that Brian was coming to the event, he asked him to share, and the rest is history.
When you're first born, I want you to imagine that you pop out and you have these little tiny green sunglasses on. Can you imagine that? Imagine that. I know it's a ridiculous thing, but just imagine you come out and you got these dark, let's say these are green sunglasses. And let's say that I'm looking down at this gentleman's shirt, Brian. If I was looking at Brian's shirt, you might not all be able to see Brian, but if I was looking at his shirt and I have these dark green sunglasses on, what color would I say his shirt is? Green, pretty obvious, right? And then let's say Chris, I assume this is his wife, right, comes along, and Chris tells me, she says, no, his shirt's white. What would I tell Chris? You're wrong, you're a liar. That'd be kind of blunt, yeah. I'd say, you don't know what you're talking about. You must be colorblind. In fact, would it matter how many times that Chris tells me that's white? Would I ever believe that it's white? No, never. However, if I discover that I have a set of sunglasses on and I lift them off, in less than a second, I can see what I couldn't see before. In this case, I can see white, which I couldn't see before.
Brian spoke at every event since that time. Brian also recognized how the message of increase could impact the leaders attending his upper-level seminars and booked Bob to share at his illustrious Heart of the Samurai events.
And now what I have the privilege of doing is introducing one of my best friends, a person that has had more impact on me personally than anybody other than the person that led me to Christ and taught me the work that I do. He has impacted my children. Klemmer & Associates has grown because of his advice to us. They call him Dr. Increased.
Over the years, the Klemmers became close friends of the Harrison family.
Oh yes. Every talk needs a 3x5 card. Yes, where would Bob be without 3x5 cards? We just feel very appreciative of your friendship, the two of you. First time we went to Hawaii and spoke at the Increase Conference, I remember Sharon out in the hallway and taking time to talk to us and make sure, even though we didn't know anybody there other than Bob, that we were accepted and welcomed. And those little things are the great things. And so here's a toast to Bob and Sharon for many, many years of just joy that they both deserve. Hear, hear.
Brian unexpectedly passed away on April 7th, 2011. Bob was honored to be asked to be the MC at the family's farewell service. He also was the MC at Brian's memorial service, held a week later, where others shared of the tremendous impact of Brian's life.
Brian always said everything that happens so you can learn something from it. Brian was always teaching us life lessons. But more than teaching them, Brian lived them. All right, one of the things I noticed about Brian, whenever he came to our events, they were in the front row. Now, they weren't in the front row because they wanted to be noticed, because they knew the TV cameras panned the front row. They were in the front row because there was a characteristic of Brian that made him great. Whatever he was going to commit to, whatever he was going to do, he'd give it everything. Brian is the #1 person that has received the award that we give out every year for bringing the most first-timers. And Brian loved to get that award, and he wanted to be sure he got the picture with me of getting the award, too.
Brian wanted to create a world that works for everyone. And I think that as we move forward, without Brian, we need to manifest this vision.
I feel that Brian changed the world. You look at the next generation, they're going to be different because he changed how this generation thinks.
You know, when I think of Brian Klemmer, I think of a lyric from Eminem who says, this is what happens when a tornado meets a volcano. The tornado of activity that Brian could generate in his presence, the ideas that he would just come up with, the resolve and intentionality, combined with that volcanic sense of energy. And it's almost like he was always bundling up some kind of potential explosion that was happening. And I think that's what attracted me to him, because that's the kind of people I like to be around, people that are alive.
I learned so many great things from Brian. I think that one of the greatest lessons was about determination, and another lesson was about intention and focus and keeping an eye on the prize and making a difference. There were so many times that I wanted to back off, or that I wanted to, the going got really hard in the building of the business, and I wanted to take an easier way. But Brian was always about the challenge and always about moving forward.
When I think of Brian, I think of a man smiling, bringing light, hope, cheer into a room like very few people I know could. It was always a delight to be around him. It was never a dull moment, and he always had something very intriguing, interesting, or stimulating to say.
You raised me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I'm on your shoulders. You raised me up to be more than I could be. Thank you, Brian.